Welcome to another episode of the Relationship Toolbox, a show that deals with the skills we need to build healthy relationships with others. Have you ever found yourself in a position of getting ready for work and just dreading the thought of going to work? Maybe the office just has so much tension, controversy going on that it just doesn't seem a pleasant place to be. Or perhaps there's one person at work who is rather toxic or dramatic and makes it rough for the rest of you. Or perhaps it's a boss or a supervisor who could be overbearing, maybe not in touch with what you're doing or micromanaging. Or it could be just that you're finding that the work that you've done just isn't as fulfilling as it used to be. Unfortunately, these situations are becoming more common. That people are reporting that they feel in their place of work. So we thought we'd do a show today on what is the basis for some of the environments in the work area, and what are some of the concepts that we need to understand about human behavior that perhaps could help us deal with situations like that.
Yeah.
So maybe, Marsha, if you could start out with what are the basic universal needs that we all have in the workplace?
Yeah, it's important to look at those because sometimes when we are frustrated or upset or unfulfilled, it's because a basic need isn't being met. So we're going to look at 7 universal needs that all humans experience. And we're defining a need as something that's required for good mental and physical health, and something that needs to be met not only to survive, but to thrive. So when our needs are met, we're generally happy, we're feeling fulfilled, and things are going well. If our needs are not getting met, at least one of them that we're going to be talking about, we might be like depressed, angry, frustrated, and we might be acting out because that need isn't getting met.
And not even knowing why we're
Yeah, just kind of, if we haven't reflected and identified it in ourselves or been curious about that, we may not know. We're just unsettled and something's bothering you. Sometimes you feel that way when something happens to you and you're just kind of not yourself. So the very first need that we're looking at is physical. It's kind of the basic need at the beginning. So is your space comfortable? Is the temperature good? Is it warm enough or cool enough? Is it clean? Do you have good air quality? Is there air circulating and is it healthy? Do you have adequate space for you to do your work? It's just the basic description of your environment. The next would be to look at safety. Now this could be physical safety. Are there hazards in the workplace? Am I putting myself in harm's way to do my job? But those hazards or those perceived harms could also be social or emotional. In my workplace, am I afraid of experiencing humiliation or bullying or harassment? Do I trust my colleagues? Are they going to look out for me? Do they have my back? So those are things that we need to be concerned about.
And continuing with those universal needs, another one that hits us all, in fact, many disagreements, fights, wars have been fought over this, is respect and acceptance. So by that we mean that people do appreciate what we're doing, they show respect for us, and we feel kind of a bond with our coworkers. They may not be our best friends, or they may, but at least we feel a bond with them. Continuing with these basic needs is the need for choice or having some autonomy in our place of work. By that we mean that we have some input, some say-so as to how the job is done. After all, we're the ones doing it all the time and learning how to do it well, so we should have some input as to what is the best way of doing it. So our suggestions, if they are taken seriously and become incorporated into the problem solving of the work, then those needs are being met.
So as we move up to even a little more refined needs, we talk about the need for success. Are my efforts paying off? Do I feel competent and successful in getting things done and carrying out my responsibilities on the job? And when I do that, are my accomplishments acknowledged and celebrated and recognized? Also, do I have opportunity? The skills and the talents that I embody, can I use them on the job? Or am I feeling stifled and maybe being channeled to do something that isn't a good alignment with my abilities? And finally, do I have a sense of purpose and identity? Does my image of myself, the values that I hold, my very basic reason for being align with this work? Or is there something that's like incongruent that I'm struggling with? How do others perceive me? Do they perceive me the way I want to be perceived and the way I perceive myself? And is my work making a difference? So these are the things that we need to have met in the workplace if we're going to feel fulfilled and happy and aligned and generally enjoy our job. We're going to, Tom, we experience these things on different degrees in terms of our life experiences, our personality, and our individual temperaments. And we may have a need for, just like when we've talked about love languages, we may have certain needs that are really kind of important to us or raw if we don't have them met.
Right. For example, one that comes to mind is autonomy. Some people have a very strong need to direct themselves in what they do. Others do not feel comfortable doing that. They like taking some recommendations or direction from other people. They still both have that need to some extent, but very different intensity.
Right, right. So as I said earlier, if our needs are getting met, we're kind of like, we're okay, work is pleasant, we don't fear it, we don't get that sinking pit in our stomach on Monday morning when we've got to go in. But if one or more of our needs are not getting met, we might kind of have those frustrations that leak out in our interactions with others or in how we perform our job. And we need to keep these things in mind, not only to identify where we might want to work on getting needs met, but when things happen between us and coworkers, we might have a better understanding of what's going afoul, what's wrong, if we think about it as what needs are not getting met, as opposed to just like they're impossible or they're labeling them and the dysfunction or the negative behavior. If we kind of take a step back and say, I wonder what's going on here. And so a reflection on that will help us respond to the people that we work with better if we're focusing on that. So and there are actually steps that we could look at.
We'll be talking about those, yes. Another construct or understanding that we think is important for people to understand in the world of work is what forms behavior? How is it created? It just doesn't come out of the blue. Some people say, well, I'm Italian or I'm this or that, that's the way I am. Well, no. In addition to these basic needs that we've talked about, there needs to be an understanding of why do people behave the way they do? So there are 4 elements that we want to call to your attention when trying to consider the question either why am I behaving the way I am or why somebody else? And in this case, specifically in the work environment, although this is applicable to any relationship. Right. So the first thing that we need to be aware of is something usually in the environment or interaction with someone else triggers some strong emotions in us. And as you mentioned, we could feel it in our gut. We can just not be aware of what the feeling is necessarily, but we are not feeling good or we're feeling outraged at something. So it's
something outside of ourselves that happens that we have to deal with.
Right, yes. So it can take us on at any particular point. And it doesn't mean that every little thing triggers us. When we say a triggering event, we're talking about something that really has a strong impact on our emotions, which probably will have to do with those basic needs again, if they're not being met, or if the triggering event tends to threaten one of our needs.
Or if it's unexpected and we have to react to it.
Right. usually it does take us by surprise. So the triggering event is the first thing that we need to be aware of. And the second thing is being able to label the feelings. This is something that I've worked with children right up through older adults. And we discovered this in working in the workplace, that people often are reacting with feelings, but when you ask them, what is it that you are feeling, they can't identify it.
Mm-hmm. And that's why you were saying we might not even know what's bugging us because we haven't tried to identify that feeling
Exactly.
yet.
And when we talk about degree of response, if I am just a little annoyed by something that's happened between me and someone else, that calls for a certain type of intervention or interaction. If I am enraged by that, then I've got other skills that I have to put to work right away to deal with that emotion. So we really need to understand what is the emotion and what degree of that emotion are we experiencing.
And sometimes we mislabel them as well.
Yes, we call
Because
things angry and
when you're really hurt. Or
yeah, and that's a secondary emotion. So usually it shows frustration or hurt when we're experiencing that, but it comes out as anger. So the next thing, once we have identified the feeling, is we have a thought that runs through our head, or thoughts. And usually these thoughts are our interpretation of why this event occurred. They meant to hurt me, or they're just trying to get to me, or they're just trying to make me look silly, or humiliate me, or they're just trying to show off, or they're just trying to get back at me. We're beginning to interpret what we perceive in that event and what our feelings are. So the thinking usually justifies the feelings that we have. So you can see that we can really begin to get off track if we're not careful at this point. The next step, and the fourth one, is we have to put this into an expression of some type. As human beings, we just don't take different things that happen to us without reacting to them. So most of us will begin to respond with a behavior of our own to these things, that the triggering event, our feelings, and the thinking that went along with that. So for example, if someone does something to me that makes me very angry, then depending on my personality and the skills that I have at my use, I might show anger by, how dare you talk to me that way or do this, and blow up at them. Or
you could retreat.
Or I could retreat, yes. I could avoid them so that they could not sense at all that I was really upset, which of course really leads to problems with communication. And then when we're showing you on the slide with person one and person two, person one going through the process I just described, let's say they avoid saying anything about how they are upset with what person two did. So person two has no idea, except that they're noticing that person one tends to avoid them, isn't talking to them, walks by them without saying anything. And so they begin to get a feeling of, what's wrong here? What am I doing? Or why are you treating me this way? So it could be hurt, it could be anger, annoyance.
Based on assumptions.
Well, that's where the thinking comes in. They begin to come up with their own reasons for this. And then they come up with their own behavior. Well, if you're going to treat me like that, I won't talk with you either. And that becomes an additional triggering event for person number one. And around we go with these different steps. And this is referred to as the conflict cycle.
And it can crystallize in a workplace so that you repeat this behavior because it's an easy pattern to just kind of get stuck in.
We feel more and more justified the more we go around that cycle, that I'm right and it's the other person who is doing the wrong thing, so I'm justified in doing what I'm doing. And when we get to that point, it's going to be a constant struggle and unpleasant feelings for everyone.
So let's take some examples and apply it to the human needs and the conflict cycle, and then maybe some of the steps that you could take either alone or with another party to help you get out of this. So for instance, you're in a workplace and your colleague uncharacteristically blows up over what you think was something like so insignificant.
Yeah, big deal. Why are you so angry
Relatively
about this?
minor item. Okay, so you forget to tell the person that their partner called and wanted a call back as soon as possible. And it slipped your mind, or you were busy, or whatever your reasoning was, you didn't do it in a timely way, and this person just like lit into you.
Well, the person number one never got the message.
Right.
And now is reacting to that.
Reacting, and it seems like an overreact to you. Mm-hmm. Okay, so
looking at it through the concept of human need,
right.
we can guess at it. I mean, obviously no one knows for sure
Right.
until they talk with a person. But what are some of the guesses that we think?
I'm feeling like maybe I can't trust you. So it's not safe because I can't trust you. You don't have my back. You aren't looking out for me.
If you really cared about me, you
would-
wouldn't have forgotten that.
Right.
You would have realized it.
Yeah. Okay. So another example, and we'll circle back
Well,
to
it gets into some other needs there too.
trust and respect
Yeah,
too.
trust is in there. And respect, again, that's a very powerful one. If I don't feel respected, that usually is a fairly strong emotional reaction to that.
Mm-hmm. And it drives you apart.
Yes.
So in that same workforce, you might overhear some of your colleagues talking about you and how you do your job, maybe in a way that's disparaging. And wow. Whew.
Or do you realize the reason that we were talked to the way we were by the boss was because he didn't get that job done and right? Or we're always having to make up for the mistakes this person is making, and rather than addressing it with the person or with the supervisor, they're talking behind the person's back.
So, wow, that's an emotional safety piece. Like
Yes.
you don't feel like the people that you work with care about you.
That
In
can
fact,
certainly-
they're out to get you.
That can certainly lead to that feeling of dread going to work
Yeah.
because no one wants to have people talking about him or her behind his back.
Yeah.
And respect is there again.
And you're not able to succeed because you feel like you're at a disadvantage because the team is not a team.
Right. If I'm not doing the job right, or I'm doing something wrong, why aren't you telling me about it, and why aren't you helping me correct it?
Yeah.
So I can be successful and not be talked about in this way.
Yeah. And in a third example, we've got a colleague who is constantly offering you unsolicited advice or
boy.
interfering or giving you help when none is perhaps needed. And we're getting into some of the higher level needs then, kind of like respect, autonomy, success and opportunity, and I want to show that I'm self-reliant and that I'm talented enough to get this done, and perhaps even I want to be recognized for my contribution that isn't, that you have not meddled in. So,
And if a person who has strong needs for choice and making out their own ways of working on it might really react to that and saying, well, let me try to work on this first myself, and then if I need some advice, I'll come to you with it. So their need for autonomy is being hit pretty hard.
and in each of these situations, there isn't really a bad guy or a victim. It's just sometimes the lack of communication and misaligned expectations, because in each case, the other person could have the best of intentions, but just the interaction is missing because
Right.
you haven't communicated your needs.
And that's why we're bringing this to our audience, basically, to understand. If you look at this concept in terms of, I wonder what
What's going on?
basic need might be involved, because that's feeding this behavior.
Right.
So which of these 7 might be involved? And not only does it help you in terms of thinking about the other person and maybe reacting less vehemently yourself, but it gives you a basis for starting a conversation with the other person.
About the need rather than the behavior.
Right.
And you can take the blame and the accusations and the shaming out of it.
Right.
And just say what is missing here.
Instead of saying, oh, you're so sensitive, you're too sensitive and everything, you say, hey, we all have a need to be recognized, don't we? We all have a need to be successful. We all have a need to be respected. So what's happening here
Yes, yeah.
that is feeding or not feeding that need that you have?
So let's go back to that first example of the blow up, that uncharacteristic blow up, and look at some steps that we could use to resolve the conflict.
So that one employee talking to the
Talking
other.
to the other one. So let's imagine we could take it from either perspective, the person who blew up or the person that was receiving that. But let's just say that we're the person that happened to. Like, oh my gosh.
We're on the receiving
what
end.
happened? What is this about? So you're going to say, hey, can we talk? And you're going to set a time and a private place. You don't want to have this out in the open. You want it to be safe to be able to talk about it. And then prepare. Imagine that you're going through this, and don't go into it cold. Think about what your goals would be. Determine what your feelings and thoughts were and what your desired outcome is.
Right. And remembering, too, if you are prepared for it, remember that you've had the advantage of preparing for it. The other party may be taken by surprise with, oh, let's talk about this. So they might not respond to you right away in the manner in which you had hoped. And then you have to be careful not to get into your own cycle. Well, I tried, and look what you did to me, so the heck with you. We have to, again, keep thinking about, what need was still there, and what do I need to find out from this person to help me understand why they're still having difficulty talking about
Or what
it.
really happened. And,
Yeah.
and it takes practice. This is not like a do it perfectly the first time either. But so you've set up the time and you're together, you've practiced, you've identified your outcomes and feelings, and you want to just describe what
Right.
you heard or observed without all of the extra embellishment and blaming and shaming and assumptions and all that
This is
business.
where we often make a big mistake, where
It's
we say,
hard.
well, when you acted so stupid, or when you really were inappropriate in your actions,
Yeah.
we have now given them a judgment. Do not expect someone to receive that well, or for that to lead to understanding and an ability to get the relationship back again. So we're encouraging people, when in this situation, avoid the judgments, even though you may in your mind think I know why they did this, and watch the blaming or making assumptions. You want to approach this in terms of curiosity. I want to see the situation through their eyes, even if I think that is totally out of place or wacko. I still want to see it, because that will make sense to me then why they act the way they did, and then we can correct the perception.
So in your neutral way of describing what you observed or experienced, you then want to share your impact. Like what the happening.
Because it's a two-way street.
Right. So this is how I felt and this is what I thought when this happened, when you blew up at me. So
This made it very difficult for me to work with you. That's why I'm coming to talk with you, because I still find myself replaying that incident in my mind.
and
So-
I'm confused.
Yeah, I'm confused by it. I want to be treated with respect, as I'm sure you do. So that's why I'm asking, could we talk about this?
So then the next step that you would take is to say, help me understand what your intention or what your motivation or what drove you to behave in that way. And then you've got to listen with curiosity.
And be careful when you're saying, well, what was your intent? Because if it comes across as, again, another accusation of them, that's going to trigger defensiveness. So putting it in the form of what you said, like, I'm confused,
yeah, I'm
I don't know
confused.
how to take this, and your friendship is important to me, so can you help me understand what was going on in your mind, or what feelings you were
Or
experiencing?
what was happening that day, or what, just
Yeah.
help me.
And thinking again of those, what is behavior based on, you can go back and ask about what was the triggering event, what were you feeling, what were you thinking at the time. That will open up more ability to talk about it, and maybe once you understand that, you can say, oh, I get it, now I know why you did that. But we know that that wasn't the case, so
I think you also have to be willing to discover that you may have contributed as well. It's not just
Exactly.
about, like, what about the situation triggered you? And it could have been me. You
Right,
know?
and their perception of it, well,
Right,
will
even
give
if
you a clue.
yeah, and even if your intention was not. And then that could be a very fertile conversation with clarifying questions and back and forth. until you really understand. Doesn't mean you have to buy into it or excuse them or endorse their behavior, but you really, that's where the learning comes from.
Right.
And you don't have the assumptions, and you're really, there's new information. So then you're thinking about the next time.
Well,
how
and
can we do this differently next time?
The thing is that we've learned in doing mediation a lot is you don't have to agree on exactly what happened. And it sounds contradictory, but it happens over and over again when people can say, okay, I get it. From your point of view, I can understand why you did that, even though I didn't like it and it wasn't right, and you understand what I did. So even with that, you can say, so if this were to happen again in the future, what would you like me to do differently so you're not feeling those feelings? And could I ask you in the future, if this were to happen, to approach me in this way? And I will agree to whatever will be helpful for you as well. Now we're beginning to form an agreement based on understanding and respect. Remember, those are some of the most basic needs.
So if we just touch back on the content of that first example, we might discover that the couple had just had a fight and they needed to talk. Or
Right.
there could have been, they were waiting for medical results, or there's something that happened in the family, or there was some timely decision that had to be made. And that was not transparent to the other person, and so they didn't think it was a big deal. But it could also apply to like things in the workplace. You don't let me know when clients have called. It could just be something that's even deeper. But that is an area where when you were just talking and asking non-judgmental questions about, I really want to know what happened, you could learn so much and then apply it
So
to.
each of you has shared the impact of whatever happened on both of you.
You've kind of made that conflict cycle transparent. Like, this is what happened, this is what I felt, this is what I thought, this is why I behaved that way. Oh, well, then I thought. And you've just disclosed what really happened. Hey, and if it works, then you have a new skill, you've solved a problem, you thank the other person for engaging in this civil, calm-ish dialogue, so that you can do it again and do it even better. And if it didn't go well, and it might not the first time, you could ask to, like, hey, well, could we talk about this again? We're making some headway, but we haven't maybe finished it. Or you could enlist the help of another person or people.
It might be a time to bring in the
To bring in
supervisor
another
at that
person.
point. But then you can say, this is how I approached it before, and it still didn't seem to work, so I need to have more understanding of this. You're still using the skills, and the third party is watching you use those skills and reinforcing that, so that it's not guaranteed that you're going to get the results you want always, but you certainly aren't going to make matters worse, and you set the stage for using those skills for everybody involved in the situation.
And they're transferable skills that you can use with other people in your life as well. We are not saying that this is easy, but it is an alternative to repeating the same negative cycle that is giving you that feeling about being at work or working with this person. And so we hope that by both looking at the underlying needs that may or may not be met, that helps describe or help you understand the behavior that you might be encountering or the behavior that you might be displaying. And that there are new ways to approach this.
So instead of dreading going to work, maybe my attitude could be, I think I know some ways to approach this, and take some pride in the fact that you're using these skills to accomplish that goal.
We thank you very much for joining us today on the Relationship Toolbox as we were looking at how to readdress some conflict in the workplace and maybe frame it differently so that you can come to a happy resolution. We'll see you again soon.